Hello, 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 friends, and welcome back. Grab your drink of choice, grab your crafting project of choice, grab your pet of choice, because it is Friday, which means it's not Friday. Oh, I wish it was Friday. It is Thursday, which means that it is another episode debrief where I'll be going through your comments from last Friday's main channel video. That would be this one right here, in case you're wanting to go back and refresh yourself. I'm going to respond to some of your comments, answer some of your questions, and we are just generally going to have a good time talking about renovation and YouTube and a whole bunch of random stuff. By now, if you're here, you know the drill, so let's dive right in. Let's take a look at the category comments for this week. I have to say that the top comment, of course, was just the whole category. Everyone loves Phil's dad, everyone loves Jean, but we've also got some other fun categories. We've got What's With Your Window, we have Safety Squints, Mortar, Automated Corgi Lifts, Magnetic Personalities, Tricky Titles, You're in the Right Place, The Illusions of the Internet, aka A Good Editor, Defenestration, and of course the category-defying miscellaneous ones that were funny and I loved them and they just couldn't fit into any other category. So let's dive right in, right off the bat. Everyone loves Phil's dad. I'm not surprised. This kind of happens anytime you bring a new character onto the channel. What's it called? Second character syndrome. Everyone falls in love with that character. It often happens when people bring their significant others into videos. I know a couple of my creator friends have also noticed this phenomenon in the isolated videos in which they bring their spouses or husbands or whatever onto the channel. Everyone always falls in love with them. Phil's dad was no exception to the rule. PC Fixer called his dad a legend. Other people were saying it's so wonderful to see him come out and help you guys. Really loved Anne's comment. She said, I had to cross an international border to have coffee with Phil's dad. Just saying. And then this one got a bunch of likes. That's Interesting 363 wrote, I adore the addition of a father figure. Bring it on. Tons of heart emojis. The world needs more representation of general wisdom, connection, and support. More heart emojis. So yeah, just a lot of love for John, and why am I saying that the English way? So don't worry, there will be lots of Jean in the coming weeks. He came out to stay at the house for maybe 8-9 days. So you've got another maybe 3, max 4 videos hanging out with him and us at the house. So there's going to be more Jean in your future. But then, of course, that did lead into the next category of comments, which is the safety squint. The So Unknown wrote, safety squint, laughing emoji. To be honest, a working man of that generation, him doing the safety squint, trademark, is as close to PPE as he's gonna get. And there were a lot of other comments in this same vein, like a lot of people just laughing at the turn of phrase, first of all, but then also like some people saying it's something genetic that all dads come with. Quaintly So said, as somebody who's gutted a kitchen and 2 bathrooms in my own old house with my father-in-law, I feel you regarding getting stubborn older men to wear PPE. There's only so much one can suggest to them. So yes, it does seem like it's a generational thing. Nobody seems to expect the older generations to wear PPE, and thankfully nobody gave me any crap for it. Like it was genuinely a funny joke. It is a joke that we make in real life. The phrase safety squint was not invented for that video and that voiceover. We actually make this joke fairly often, because he's not somebody who wears PPE even if there's tons of it available and it is offered to him. But, you know, if I can make the kind of amusing turn of phrase pull double duty and maybe head off some comments that might be criticizing his lack of PPE, then even better, because, you know, as I told Robin here, Robin wrote, I feel your pain. I've been trying to get my father to use PPE since the 1970s. You have to pick your battles, and that one wasn't one you would have won. The squint is universal. My dad does the same. And so I responded and I said, precisely, he's a grown-ass man who was made aware of the fact that we have lots of PPE on hand ready for him to use, and from there, it's his choice. And that's kind of always my policy. I'm not going to force anybody to wear PPE if they don't want to. I'm just going to make sure that they're, that they know that it is available for them if they want to use it. I do think it's funny, though, that everybody sees Jean working using big power tools that can cause lots of damage in flying objects, sawzall, chainsaw, grinder, all of that on that video, and he didn't have any PPE, and everyone kind of just shrugged and was like, what are you gonna do? But then I also have to say that I think it's one of the categories that I get the comments on the most, pretty relentlessly, people pursuing me and Phil when they think that we're not using enough PPE, which I find is like a kind of amusing juxtaposition. And I think it's a good idea to hold everybody up to some pretty modern safety standards, not just the younger generations, because we value the older generations as well. But it is kind of funny. I think there's just some kind of general acknowledgement that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And then this comment from Miss Rachel Ann is the perfect segue, takes us right into the next category. They write, infamous safety squint has the same energy as this spray foam is a structural element amongst the bricks. Which I laughed really hard when I read that. I think it's very true. And it takes us into the next category of comments, was just talking about the mortar, and we might get a little into the weeds on this section here. I will try to keep it interesting and moving along, but also a lot of people did say you wanted to know about the mortar more, so buckle in. We're going to talk about it a little bit. So first of all, a lot of people saying thank you for the video. Please tell us more about the mortar. And then I wanted to highlight this one comment, which is, I think, a perfect parallel. I really enjoy a good fiber arts comparison. I make them myself frequently. And Mandy La Vida said, sacrificial mortar. This is the same in sewing. If you use polyester thread, the fabric will rip before the thread in a seam, or a dart will break. I was always taught you should use a similar thread to your fabric to prevent this. Yes, it's very much the same sort of concept in terms of if you don't want your fabric to rip, you should use a thread that is weaker than the fibers of your fabric. Same thing here. If you want to preserve your foundation, then your mortar should always be softer and more porous than your brick or your stone, whatever the main element in that masonry is. And yeah, in this case, lime mortar, it's great. We love it because it is hydrophilic, so it attracts water, meaning that if your foundation gets wet, instead of subjecting your bricks or your rocks to really intense and repeated wetting and drying cycles, the lime tends to attract that water instead, and it will kind of take the brunt of that and save your foundation. And it will, of course, over time, slowly, especially if you have a good quality mortar, it will deteriorate and crumble. Like we're talking, I'm looking at needing to repoint my basement, and it's been over 100 years, so slowly, but it will need to be touched up and repointed and all that stuff. And a lot of people wanted to point out, I got a few comments saying, well, you can just get some lime and add it to regular mortar to make it more breathable and more flexible and sort of emulate the mortar that you're looking for, which I appreciate the comments. They are trying to be helpful, and especially I think they're suggesting that in a pinch, when you didn't see this work coming, this could be a quick fix, something you have access to. But it's not quite as easy as that, and it gets complicated. But if you hang out in historic building circles and communities like I do, you might know that even small amounts of cement in traditional mortars leads to inferior and less durable mortars that can still cause problems. So if you have even a small amount of a cement and that's causing problems in majority traditional mortars, then adding a tiny bit of lime into a modern cement is going to be even worse. It's not really, is it going to be slightly better than just a plain normal mortar? Maybe, but negligibly so. And one of the problems with this is that the majority of the available hydrated lime in the US is type S. It's a hydrated lime, and it doesn't have the ability to become as durable as the original historic mortars, and it's mainly a problem with we're gonna get so technical here, but it's in part a problem with the burning, the temperatures that the limes are prepared and burned at, and it's mainly added to mortars, modern mortars, as a workability aid. It adds to the plasticity, flexibility, it makes them a little bit more workable. But all of those limes, all the hydrated limes, they're falling into the dolomitic lime category. It's usually got a bunch of other crap in it. And also those limes have already gone through a double hydration process. So it's inferior, and it's in fact actually not that much different to Portland cement. It has lost a lot of the properties that we are looking for to use in these historic foundations. And like I said, it's a problem with the temperature, the process that they produce it at. So today's modern production lines, they dead burn lime in many cases. They overcook it at too long and too high of temperatures. It's complicated, and I can maybe dive into this a bit more once we get to more mortar work, because there will be some coming up in the future. Don't worry, plenty more of it. But essentially the way that, the modern production and the readily available lime that you can get, relatively readily available, the way it's been cooked is been changed in an attempt to speed up the process of production, and that limits its usefulness in historic masonry settings. So the mortar that I get from Sage, it's a naturally occurring hydraulic lime. So it's not dolomitic, it's calcitic. It has a really high calcium quantity, and it's also got evenly dispersed silica, so that we know when we add a certain percentage of sand, we're going to get a final result that has a pretty known value for liquid and vapor permeability, PSI strengths, all of that good stuff. It's going to be nice and porous. It's going to have the properties that we want. It's going to be flexible enough to allow for some shifting of the structure, but it's not going to be, it's going to still be strong enough to hold the foundation together. This is what we're looking for, and yeah, it is quite complicated. But to answer actually another question, a couple of people mentioned, well, you could just buy some ahead of time and store it at the house so that you have kind of like a stockpile for when these more surprising emergency situations come up. And it's a great idea because, of course, in renovations, everybody knows you never know what exactly is going to happen. Nobody wants to pause a project for weeks at a time because you have to ship some hard to source material from halfway across the country. However, the problem is that we don't keep a supply of it on hand because it'll probably kick off. It'll start to set. How do you make it ready to use? You add water to it. And that's what starts the whole process. It comes in a powder format, and very similar to the mortar you saw us using. You add water, you mix it, and then it's ready to use. And then adding that water starts kind of a countdown on the clock that it needs to be used, and then it starts to set. So the humidity levels around here, not just in my house personally, but where it is extra humid, but even just in the province, it's a very wet, rainy province with very high humidity levels. And I'm afraid that if I just keep a bunch of these, I'd have to wrap them with silica gel packets or something to keep them from kicking off, because we've actually already had that happen with a couple of bags of concrete and mortar. We had to do some other work in the basement and we needed to buy more, and we had too much. We had a couple bags sitting around, and a couple of them they just kicked off just purely from the humidity levels in the house. So that's why we don't have a stockpile of it on hand, because otherwise, I would just order a bunch of it from Sage right now and have it sitting at the house ready to use whenever I wanted, but that's just not a good option, unfortunately, in our climate. We've got the category of what's with your window? So there were a lot of questions actually about the window situation, both what was the original state of this part of the house, and then also what are you going to do with the window in terms of, are you keeping it, will you replace it, all that. We'll get to that part too in a second, but first let's look at the questions for how was the house originally structured, what was going on with that whole area. And was kind of funny because a lot of people weighed in being like, oh, this part of the house was clearly original and that part of the house was a later addition. Except, of course, everybody had different opinions about what was original and what was an addition. And it just makes me giggle because everybody is pretty firmly convinced that they have evidence to back up their opinion. And most of them are all wrong. So Sandra Erickson says, it looks like it might have been another entryway at one time, ? And I'm going to lean into the question mark because I don't actually know what she means by this. I'm trying to think of what part of the house she could be referring to, that there might have been another entryway. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know how to answer that one, so we're just going to leave it hanging there. We're going to move on to the next one from Desiree Gonzalez, who says, I'm confused by that window even being there. Was the entry expanded and that ended up being an original window that wasn't closed off? So Desiree is camp, entryway was a later addition, and original window didn't get closed off. Laura Stack, on the other hand, says you can almost tell that the rotten window is original and the bay window was probably added later. Why else would it be there? And then Matthew asks if we have any pictures of the house in its original state. He is sure that the original entry was closed in at a later date. So it was like an open porch and then it got closed in. And he cites that as evidence that it probably accounts for the aluminum versus vinyl siding. So the entryway is absolutely original to the house, as is the bay window. Both the bay window and the entryway are sitting on the same joined as one unit original foundation. So the footprint of the house, that's the original footprint. It's got the bay windows, it's got the entryway. None of that was an addition. Also, just looking at the way it was built, the craftsmanship and the style and the cut nails also that went into that corner of the house that we opened up, where you can see all of that amazing joinery work, the mortise and tenons, the notches that were cut out, all of that is original. So there's no way that the entry was added on later or that there was another smaller or larger entryway at one point. Entryway, always original. Bay windows, always original. They all have the same foundation. As far as we've seen, they all have the same, style of wood, style of joinery, cut nails, which, date to a very specific window in time. So that is all there. Bay window, definitely original. And then in terms of was the original entryway open and then it got closed off at a later date, I can see why Matthew would suggest that. It does seem plausible, although because I, in the present, have done a lot more digging around in that area than you in the YouTube timeline, I can confirm that, well, first of all, I don't have any pictures of the house in its original state because photography wasn't really much of a thing when the house was built, so there are no original photos of the place, at least not that I can find. I can't even find anything from like the 20s or 30s, but I can confirm within 98% certainty that the original entryway was always closed off, at least as far back as the 1902 date on the house deed. And also that means that it was definitely closed off way before the advent of either aluminum or vinyl siding. Then to tackle the second part of the question, which was people asking about the window specifically, less about the entryway, but the window itself. And so a lot of people were asking, will I eventually put a window back into that wall? Because of course you saw us close it off, and we just closed it off with a solid wall. And people came down on very different sides of the camp. Some people say it's sad to lose a window. Will you be putting it back? Some people suggested making a stained glass window to match it or to reinstate the windows into that wall at some point. And then there was a whole bunch of people that were like, I think it's such a good idea to not have the window. It was pointless. It looked really funky. It looked like an afterthought. It's cheaper to just replace it with a wall. So I thought that was pretty funny. So the plans are, I would love to put windows back in, but I do think I'll be putting more like transom windows in. So instead of a full, because of course those windows were gorgeous and tall and huge, if I put windows back in, I might consider doing more like transom windows, because then, yes, it would be nice to turn the entryway back into an entryway. Right now we don't enter the house from there, we enter the house from the side. But it would be nice if you wanted somewhere to hang up your coats and your boots and everything, you could do it in the entryway, but I also still want some light in there. So either windows on the front where there's a door, or windows, transom windows on the sides, or all of the above. I don't want to give too much away, because I do have plans for, they're kind of tied into how the house used to look, and we're not there yet. So I'm not going to really jump into that too much unless you're a patron. But to answer the question that a few of you had, will I be thinking of putting a window back? Yes, probably. I really like the light that it gives. And will I be doing my own something replica window, stained glass window? I would absolutely love to. Stained glass is one of the things that has been on my list of things I want to try for years. I think I've mentioned it on the second channel once before, but I used to do glass work. I made glass beads. So I had a little baby oven, a little baby torch. I had all the gas tanks in the corner, and it was like a whole setup. I'm used to make a lot of glass beads, haven't done it in years, but I do really like glass work, and I've always wanted to try stained glass, and I think it would be so nice to make some stained glass for the house. Now, I don't know if I would be good enough to make something that would withstand the elements, like in an exterior setting, but there are probably ways to work around that. At the same time, I probably want to let my priorities probably more letting light in than adding color. But there are, again, a lot of really fun examples here in Montreal of stained glass work that is mostly clear, and it just has a couple little details here and there that are colorful. And I think that's actually, it's a style that I just naturally like as is. I prefer the less colorful stained glass windows to the ones that are super overwhelmingly color. So I've been walking around Montreal, I've been taking some inspiration images, and again, that's probably something I'll sit down with the patrons and just talk design with them a bit more. But I think it would be, I don't know how much of a dream it is, or if I can make it a reality, but I would love to make some stained glass for the house, and potentially putting it there could be a fun place to put it, because that area already needs work. It's already not the original historic materials, so would be one of the easier ways to put it in without feeling like I'm completely betraying the original house, if you know what I'm saying. Moving on to the next category of comments, we've got the automated corgi lift, otherwise known as the flexi desk commercial. I have to say, a lot of you really enjoyed the ad spot, and I'm really glad. I strive to make them a little bit more interesting and fun. And doing the corgi lift was kind of fun. So a lot of people really enjoyed watching her ride up and down on her couch on the desk. The other thing that a lot of people really loved was standing on the desk to change the light bulbs. And I have to say that was absolutely not planned whatsoever. I knew that the desk went high, but I did not understand how high it went until I was on it. And I just pressed the button and was like, well, I'll go till it stopped. And it stopped. And I looked up and I said, I can touch the ceiling from here. So then we actually legitimately did need to change that light bulb. So I had Phil run and grab me a light bulb and was like, well, let's film me changing it. This is a fun and unexpected twist in events. And it turns out a lot of you really enjoyed that. So glad that you had fun. And then the hilarious comment for this category definitely goes to Heather Burrell, who writes, a new meaning for standing desk equals scaffolding, not to mention excellent desk dancing. Yeah, the unintended scaffolding was pretty funny. Also, since we're on the topic of ads or selling things, I did actually want to mention my friend's knitting pattern. I put out a little community post about it here, but basically I have a friend, she's a fellow circus artist and fiber artist. She's super into more the knitting, weaving, spinning aspect, although she does actually do sewing, and she went to school for sewing, so she's really good on that too. But she's spent a lot of time during the pandemic experimenting with natural dyes and everything, and now she's getting into writing her own knitting patterns, and this is one that's perfect for this season. It's the Kiteborn pattern, so it's knit on the bias. It's got this really fun drape because of that. It's a pretty good beginner level. Like, it's not very complicated. It's, like I said, great for summer, and it's very size inclusive. She goes out of her way to make sure that she does have a pretty good range of sizes, so it should fit the vast majority of you out there. I will include a link to it in the description, just because I would love to support her and send some love her way. But if you're looking for a fun, easy breezy summer knit, definitely check that one out, see if it's something that interests you. Links in all the normal places. Wanted to highlight a couple comments here that fall in the category "you're in the right place." So first we've got Peg Lamphere, who says, "Okay, I came for company while I spun up some mohair and then learned all about mortar. Who knew? Well, I guess I do now. This is only one of the reasons I love this channel." Peg, you're in the right place. We do a lot of fun things here. We do some fiber arts. We learn about mortar and historic buildings. We go for walks with the corgi. We do it all. And we hope that you have a good time while you're doing it. Next was Barbara, who writes, "Thank you for all the canal time. It's great that you go to so much trouble to recycle where possible and keep junk out of the landfill." Yes, Barbara loves the corgi, and she loves the extra time taken to recycle and keep stuff out of the landfill. So Barbara, you are in the right place. However, speaking of recycling and keeping junk out of the landfill, it kind of takes us into the next segment. I will kind of highlight it by quoting this comment that said, "Shannon, there was nothing for me to do. Proceeds to take on the most underappreciated, tedious, time-consuming task of the process. I really enjoyed seeing the whole process, including the amount of care that you took with the Dietrich." Yes, that was, I'm glad that people appreciated that, because it was definitely a instance of they're very small spaces to work in, and I often felt like I was just standing there doing nothing and filming, and I don't enjoy feeling like just a cameraman. So I was like, okay, what can I do to stay busy? And this is one of the tasks that needed to be done. And also one of the things that I am more passionate about. If I left it to Phil and his dad, they would just throw everything in the landfill. So I was like, perfect. I'm gonna spend some time taking the nails out, sorting the wood, doing all that stuff. And a lot of people did appreciate the time that went into that. And it is true. It is the most underappreciated, tedious, and time-consuming task by far. Although I will say a lot of people did mention that I should get some sort of magnet situation going on to collect the nails in case I miss some. That is absolutely in the plans. So thank you for all the great ideas. I will be either buying or more likely making a magnetic sweeper. Somebody here had a really good idea. They used, can I find it? Okay, I can't find it right now, but I will throw it up here if I find it. They used the magnet from a speaker and they've repurposed that to sweep for nails. I think that's very much on brand for me. So I will probably be doing something like that for sure. And also on brand for me, Kira Una suggested or asked if I'd ever thought about using the super rusty nails for rust dyeing fabrics. Could come up with some funky nail prints possibly. Someone else mentioned this too. So to both of you who mentioned that, I think that's a very fun idea. I will have to look into it. I'm not familiar with the process, and I don't have a whole ton of spare time these days, but all of the nails have been saved. I've got massive jars of them. So it would be kind of fun to do some rust dyeing and see if I can get some cool prints, because that would be a very fun idea. Then moving into the next section, which is tricky titles, or what I am calling, just because my inspector didn't catch it, doesn't mean we didn't know about it. So there seems to be this misconception, and I admit that it comes partly from me titling the video this way, but there seems to be this misconception from some of the viewers that we had no idea that the wall was in this state, that it was a complete surprise to us, and that Phil's father just came out and discovered this problem, and then we were like, oh my God, we have to tackle it. That's very much not how it went down. And just because my inspector didn't catch it doesn't mean we didn't know about it. And I have cited this window actually several times in previous videos as an area that we knew was a problem spot. Also, I didn't cover it in the video, but when we were on the roof with the chainsaw and we were taking down the trees, there was a moment when the chainsaw broke and Phil was working on fixing it, and I got bored and I went off to explore parts of the house. from that little roof area. And that's when, first of all, that's when I saw that our house used to have some nice cool molding on it. And there was a lot of evidence from that, which made me quite excited. But also that just looking at the woodwork and the way that the woodwork has shifted, we could tell right away that that whole entryway section had shifted and dropped a little bit, that it was pulling away from the house a smidge, because you could see that parts of trim and woodwork that were supposed to be nice, clean miters and joined together had shifted in a way that you could see exactly which way the house had shifted. And so we were like, okay, like we already knew that the window was a problem, that it was rotted. We could see that the foundation was a little bit bulging there. We didn't know the extent of the damage, but we figured like it was going to be substantial and that things had shifted out of place, which is an indication that there's something going on there. Now, if you had asked me, do I think that the wood is so rotten that you can grab it and twist it and it will just disintegrate in your hands? I didn't think it was to that point, but we did know that it was a thing. Kimberly Woods wanted to know, how could the inspector miss that? So I believe it's the same in the States as it is in Canada, and that is that inspectors can go in, but they can only use their eyes. So they're not allowed to move things. They can't even move furniture to look behind furniture. They definitely can't be opening up walls. They can't be doing anything invasive. They can only look with their eyes or the eyes of a drone. Sometimes, people will fly drones over the top of the house. He noted that the foundation was a little bit bulging there. There's a couple spots that the foundation is not in perfect shape. That was one of the spots that he did note, so he did note that. But in terms of how rotten the wood inside is, there was no way for him to know that. It's absolutely not his fault, and it's not something, they can advise you that there might be a problem with this wall here, but it would be pure speculation. And also that's something that they try not to speculate, same like lawyers, and you don't want to speculate on things you don't know. So you might bring it up, but you try not to guess concretely what's going on. Dixa Gelina says, I would be worried if it were my house. If one spot is so bad, could other places be as bad? Again, we knew right off the bat that this wall was super problematic. It was not a surprise. It was clear there was a lot of damage there. But even so, as we saw, the house is constructed so solidly that that entire sill plate was rotten and not holding up anything, and the entryway had barely shifted at all. So I'm not really concerned about the rest of my house. Everything else that we've checked is almost perfectly plumb and level so far to date. All the windowsills that I've checked, almost perfectly level. So of course there's some wonkiness in the floors and stuff. It is an old house, but it is also very well made, and especially after having seen the intense craftsmanship that went into the entryway, a part of the house that is arguably not that important, could have been an afterthought, and yet it was still made in this really well thought out, high craftsmanship level way. I'm not too worried that the rest of the house is going to just fall apart on me. It's been standing for at least 120 years, if not more, and it's still in really good shape, so I'm not too worried about it. A lot of comments along this similar line, which is, hooray for Phil's dad. What great timing for that emergency surgery on your house. To which I just have to laugh, because I will point out that Phil's dad was literally the cause of the emergency surgery. We knew the problem was there, and we were like, okay, let's wait and tackle this when we have the time and the energy to look into it and to do the proper research and everything. And his dad just kind of came along and was like, oh, look at this, rip. And I will admit, I was actually pretty irked that they didn't even consult me. There was no like, hey, maybe should we do this today instead of what we had originally planned to do? Would have liked to be consulted on that. But yes, so basically it wasn't like a coincidence. Phil's dad didn't just happen to stumble into the perfect timing for when this unexpected emergency arose. He was the cause of the reason that it was an emergency and that it was unexpected. I mean, at least, as one of you pointed out, at least he caused the problem, but then he also stuck around to help fix it, because that's not always the case. So I will give absolute credit to that, but it was just funny. It was a little bit like cart before the horse situation here. Elizabeth PhD wrote, you should put a little note in there for future renovators. Quote, sorry we didn't use the lime mortar. Phil's dad wanted to repair this wall today and we couldn't get that kind of mortar in time. Also, we forgot about the gasket. Oops. I thought it was funny on two levels. First of all, I love the idea of leaving little notes for future renovators, because I always get a little thrill when I find stuff like that. So I should give back and I should leave little notes like that as well for future renovators. But also because Elizabeth did kind of understand the situation correctly. Phil's dad made a problem, saw it, was like, okay, well, I guess we have to fix the wall. And because we were on a time crunch, it caused all sorts of complications and problems, including not using the right mortar and not putting the sill gasket in there. So I did enjoy that. Okay, roundup of miscellaneous comments. So actually there were two comments like this. One was from Alina, who says, the biggest shock of this video was you actually used a ladder. And likewise, Dakota Abroad said, a standing desk to change a light bulb? You'll really do anything to avoid buying that ladder, huh? I got a good giggle out of those. Yeah, you clearly watch my videos enough to pick out a trend and to make a little inside joke about it, and I love that. Natalie wrote, one time my dad changed the faucet in the kitchen and we lived with the hot and cold switched around for a decade. He wasn't handy, but at least he tried. And Phil and I read that comment together, actually. By coincidence, we were kind of going through and Phil was skimming the comments to see what people thought about his dad. And he read that one and he went, takes 10 seconds and a wrench to fix. And I was like, yeah, I know, but not everyone's handy. Heather writes, Canal, all work and no play makes for less cute corgi content. Yeah, everyone enjoying seeing Canal run around and play, and we're going to continue to do a lot of outdoor work in the coming videos because Jean is still here and he's helping us with the hardscaping. So there's going to be a lot of cute corgi playing outside footage, so don't worry, there's more where that came from. Emily Smith wrote, I don't know why, but that mortar looks delicious. I think I watched too many baking shows. Yeah, I definitely would advise against sampling that dough. It would not taste good and would probably give you serious digestive issues. But yeah, it does. I could see it looking kind of like, you know, a frosting or something of that sort. These two comments both made me chuckle, and they kind of go hand in hand because they're kind of two sides of the same coin. So first, Middle Muse wrote, nothing has convinced me I'm completely unqualified to renovate a house like watching these videos. Big respect for your knowledge and skills. And then Nanette wrote, watching the whole process is extremely satisfying and seems to have stirred a desire to build that I didn't realize I had anymore. Chef's kiss. So I thought that was funny, all the various takeaways that people have from the video, the various reactions. And I will say it kind of jives with all the other comments I get. Some people see the videos and clearly are like, I am more than happy to purely enjoy this experience vicariously through you. This does not interest me in doing it whatsoever. I am so glad I don't have to deal with these things. Sometimes even going then further into the, are you sure that you should have bought this house and not torn it down? So, you know, there's a spectrum. And then on the other end of that scale is all the people who are like, oh my goodness, I'm so excited seeing this. I can't wait until I can do something similar on my own house. And yeah, I would just say there are definitely like plenty of different types of people out there, and some of them are well equipped to tackle projects like this, and some probably should just buy a house that's in good shape and seem completely daunted by all the challenges that come with renovation. So it's good to just know yourself and where on that scale you sit. And there's not one that's better than the other. It's just, you know thyself and be honest with thyself. Forced to make this bloody account writes, that mystery building, referring to the one out in the backyard, might just be a small carriage house or a privy, buried treasure troves of bottles and pottery. So no, it is neither of those, and we will probably get into what it was eventually once I reveal the backstory behind my house. What's the origin story? Who built it? We're gonna get to see what that building originally was, and it was neither a carriage house nor a privy. Although, as you will see as soon as next week, 2 weeks from now, you will see it was still a treasure trove of bottles and pottery. I found, and continue to find, so much glass on my property and some bits of pottery. So that's been quite fun. I've been loving the mini archaeological dives that I've been doing on my own property. Defenestration. We did have a small category of defenestration, you know, referring to the lore of the channel, which is that I love to throw things out windows. So Bobby Johnson writes, if you defenestrate a window, is it defenesception? I wish it rolled off the tongue a little bit better, because then I would adopt it as an expression, but unfortunately the inception defenestration combination does not roll off the tongue very easily. Krista Jennings asks, so what is the term when you're actually throwing the window itself out? Like, is it still defenestration? To which Winter Boomer Shine replies, can one defenestrate a fenestra? Things to ponder at 2 a.m. So I enjoyed everybody making the defenestration reference. I actually admit that I didn't even think about it. Like, I didn't realize, yeah, we are kind of defenestrating the window. We're throwing the window out the window. Is it still defenestration? I don't know. Anyway, those are my thoughts for today. Hope you had fun. I will catch you in tomorrow's main channel video, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Bye!